Newstalk, KIT.com. That's how you find us. And we have a special guest in the studio this morning, 15th District State Representative Bruce Chandler in the house today. And we've got him here because we want to talk about the McCleary decision. And if you listen to KIT News, you know that school district employees from around the valley are speaking out about salary increases for the coming year. Many are not happy about we've had a number of rallies happen. Teachers have rallied. The employees contend that the districts are not meeting the state salary requirements under the McCleary decision that was settled in the legislative session, and they say more rallies are expected. And so
a little more background on that even, Lance.
Right.
So that's, we're talking predominantly Yakima, Sela, Tompanish right now.
Right.
We are seeing settlements coming in from around the rest of the state, and some of those numbers have the local people concerned.
Right.
I will,
right.
In full disclosure, my wife is a teacher in the Yakima School District. So if you need to allow that to color what we say, so be it. We're going to try to just stick to the facts. That's why we brought the good Representative Chandler in here, because we want to know a little bit about legislative intent and that sort of stuff. So good morning, sir. Thank you for your time this morning. Good to see you.
It's good to see you.
You're always a well-informed and fun guest, and so thank you for your lighthearted approach sometimes to all the serious stuff. You've always got a ready smile and a laugh, and that's makes you the great, engaging political guy that you are. So.
Well, it never ceases to amaze me that I'm still alive.
That you're still ticking, right? Well, the show isn't over yet, sir. So here, let's start with this. As I was reading over some information sent to me by the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction, it was the memo that the legislature received in late July from their office, and in it was this talk of the salary work group and all of this, and they had made a recommendation for a minimum salary beginning teacher at like $48,000. Before that, it was something like 33 or whatever, and I think that we sort of split the difference, and we now have a minimum starting pay. Was that not the legislative intention, around $40,000? Is that correct? Is that your?
No, it's starting salary is going to be $60,000 under the budget that we passed.
60.
Yeah.
What? When does that kick in? Because I'm going back into teaching.
It's going to be phased. It's going to be phased in. I think it'll be another biennium before it's completely fully funded. But my understanding was it was $60,000.
All right. So under the legislative intent, you guys made a certain amount of money available to all of the various districts across the state, and there had to be some kind of criteria. We know that on the housing crunched west side, there was housing money that some teachers are getting. They're getting a portion of their raises based on the inflated housing costs over there. I think the WEA says that Edmonds starting teachers are going to get $60,000 because like 18% of that is housing, that sort of stuff. We're seeing those kinds of numbers. But Yakima starting pay was, I think, 33 or something like that, and we've been told that 40 is the new starting spot. And Yakima offers like a 3.3% raise to what their next contract offering was. And I don't know if you've been part of all of that, or if I'm laying stuff on you that you haven't had time to
No,
process.
we aren't really informed by what goes on in the negotiations between employees and in the school districts.
Right. But you guys had something in mind when you gave them the money, right?
Well, yeah, and it is... it is a little bit convoluted, because what it does is money that was being spent through local levy money that was being spent for salaries and compensation is now going to be collected as state property tax instead of the local levy property tax, and will be paid out. So that makes it a little more confusing to see the total at the end.
All right, let's see if I can chew this up and spit it out another way. According to the Yakima Teachers Association, the Yakima Education Association, the local union, Yakima has something like $10.375 million that they're saying was delivered for raises, for pay increases for teachers. And the pay raise that the district is offering falls way short of that. And they claim that legislative intent was that if you got money for teacher raises, it was all supposed to go for teacher raises. And while technically you bargained for it, you shouldn't have to beg, and that's what I believe the article said, we shouldn't have to beg and fight for that which the legislature wanted us to have in the first place. Does that sound...
Well, the supplemental budget, the budget we passed this spring, increases state spending on K-12 education by $730 million or so, just a little short of $1 billion. There will be other increases over the next couple of biennia, but for the most part, that was money that has been paid in local property taxes that now is going to be state property tax funded. And the reason for that is that it covers the court ruling was that local school districts and have been using local levy money to pay for basic education services. And that is, basic education was defined by the legislature in 2012. And so they are using that definition. And that was what they found, that we were out of compliance by, in their view, forcing local school districts to come up with the money that we weren't paying. So there is a shift over the next several years from local property tax to state property tax, and it is not an increase more than it's just a different name on the check.
Well, see, that's part of the confusion. Yeah, totally. If it was levy money, which is a property tax, it's a so much percent per $100,000 home kind of thing. So local levies would your local district would come to you, and they would give you the option of turning it down or not. Yes, right? And so you could turn your back on that. When it's in the hands of the state and it's property tax money, there is no turning your back on that. That, whatever the legislature sets for property tax for education, that's what's going to happen, correct? I mean, that's...
Well, there are some statutory restrictions on it, but and ultimately the voters would vote on an issue like that. Okay. There's no doubt that it would end up on the ballot one way or the other.
So I guess what I'm trying to decide is there $10 million more for raises, or is it the same money just being handed a different way? Because in that case, how is there any money for raises for anybody if it's just a different, instead of the locals taking it out of property taxes, the state taking it out of property taxes? How is Othello settling for 17-18% and Eastmont 17-18% raises, those kinds of things? How does that happen if it's the same money with just a different check?
I have no idea. It'll be interesting to find out. But we have absolutely no information from local school districts or from the union as to what they're doing. It was an issue with public employee unions in general during the session, and in fact we passed legislation, or we voted on legislation to require more public disclosure and allow, because the state contracts are all negotiated through between the governor,
with the governor in a closed door, right?
Yeah, and so a lot of us felt that that needed to be a more open process, and we needed to be informed before the last day of session of what that agreement would be, and how they got there, and what was being considered, and what had been discarded during the course of the process.
Right.
That bill did not pass, but what did pass was the creation of a select committee, which means there's both senators and House members on state employment, and we're supposed to be getting briefed on from time to time on the progress of the collective bargaining, which just started in in I think there's some in July, but it really gets started in August and it's September, and the governor typically every governor shoots for releasing their complete budget proposal at the beginning of October.
I was going to say early on, right? So that the first one that everybody looks at.
That's the one.
And then everybody kind of targets what they're doing around that. One of the things, again, back to the McCleary aspect, people are wondering if, say, for example, I'm in a district and it takes me $10 million to run my district the way we think it needs to be run, but we only get $9 million of it from the state, so we run a local levy, property tax levy, to pick up that extra $1 million. Now with levies being capped at $1.50 or whatever it is, changing the levy structure and then augmenting that missing money by way of state property tax. If it's a zero-sum game, what I lose versus what the state sends me, then I'm in no better position to pay teachers or anything because it's a zero-sum game. Other people are saying, well, we're going to pay teachers at the expense of programs because if we have to take state money for teachers and we have less levy money for programs, we're going to wind up losing certain programs. Have you heard that argument from folks? That
I've heard it in the past. I mean, that comes up every biennium, every 2 years.
Yeah.
Excuse me, every 2 years when collective bargaining is undergoing. But it's, I don't have any inside information or any official briefing from either side. So, legislators are left to wait until the governor makes a proposal, and that's really where we begin to have a role. And that's the way it's been practiced. It's not something that a lot of us really feel it works best, but I think that's going to be the major preoccupation of the coming session, just as it was of the last two.
Yeah. Ain't heard the last one yet.
And a big part of it is that there has been competition to try and spend more local levy money for things that are not directly labeled as
basic education,
as basic salary or basic compensation, but they call them tri-days, which are undefined days where it's possible to get professional training and to have administrative and staff meetings and things like that.
Sure.
In many districts, people are paid that money, which there's in at least one district it amounts to 16%.
Wow, that's a
increase
lot.
in income, and it's paid for. There is no obligation. I mean, they aren't getting training or
right. It's there, but it doesn't mean it's just doing anything.
Kind of a backdoor way of moving the local money, and I think the whole McCleary case was focusing on ending that diversion of local funds for pay what is essentially just base salary.
Right. Bruce, can you give us a few more minutes? Can you stick with us? We've had some people that want to ask a question or two. Maybe you've got answers, maybe you don't, but you're always willing to chat with folks.
Sure.
Got a couple more minutes. All right, we're going to take a break for news here at the bottom of the hour. We're talking with Bruce Chandler, Representative Bruce Chandler, about the McCleary decision, and we'll continue with that.
We are continuing our conversation with 15th District State Representative Bruce Chandler talking about teacher salaries. Jackson over here screaming, not screaming, asking if we're going to be taking any phone calls, Dave.
Well, if it applies to this topic of legislative intent, certainly Bruce has indicated that we'll be talking about this at the session, and who knows for how long we'll be talking about the tweaks and the adjustments and all of this to this. Any time you do a sort of a wholesale redefining of how you're paying for something, it's going to take a while to settle out. That's a fair statement, Bruce?
Yeah, well, I believe it was back in in the late 1960s, local levy authority was granted. And
prior to that, we got what we got from the state, and that was it, right? That's what you ran your district.
Except for construction and capital costs. But they in the early 70s, that's when that became an issue because of there were some districts that were grandfathered in, so they were getting a better deal than everybody else. There were about 10 of them, I think, and there were other things going on, and so there were a lot of teacher strikes and things. I mean, I actually at that time, for several years, I was a bus driver in the Everett School District, which was one of the biggest. It was one of the grandfathered districts, and it was getting a better deal. And we had we had to go through teachers to get out of the bus yard.
Cross the lines,
for
huh?
about a month. It probably wasn't a month, but it felt like it. But
They throw eggs at your bus or anything?
they climbed up on the hood. They climbed up on the mirrors and stuff, and they were hanging from the bus.
Wow.
The teachers?
Yeah. But, it was a little bit rowdy, but we were all younger then.
Yeah.
We have that led to the first court case, and we've been in court, and it's been several names, but it's now it's a McCleary case, and it'll have a different name the next time. But I don't for a minute have any delusion that whatever resolution comes out next year, or this one, if it survives the coming session, that it won't be litigated. We did. I think the legislature made, and it doesn't always accomplish this, but I think in this case, the legislature made a good faith effort to address the concerns of the court.
Yeah. The court seemed
Happy.
cool by it. They,
Yeah.
they basically. Do you still owe them a big check for $100,000 a day fines, or you guys kiss and make up on that?
Well, I think I don't know if they've stopped or not. We do still have an account that has money in it. Yeah.
We do, huh? All right. Do we want? I want to go back. You were talking average, and I was talking minimum when we said the starting pay. And I want to just clarify that starting according to an article in the Spokesman Review here from earlier this year, and this is in line with what McKenna said, that the legislature's minimum starting pay by legislative intent was slightly over $40,000. You'd mentioned 60, and the article talks about 60 as an average pay, and so we were kind of talking minimums and averages there. Fair.
Yeah.
Clarify that. So.
Annual mean wage in Washington for secondary school teachers except special and career technical education, about $61,000, Dave.
Yeah. Okay, so that's what Bruce was getting at.
Yeah.
Bottom line, if we use the term legislative intent, and what you folks had in mind was to address the districts with this last supplemental budget, and people were saying that was, it's so difficult to get a straight feel for this because partisan politics kind of comes in one side versus the other, education and Democrats, and we need even more money than what we've got, and so the whole salary thing, basically, I'll try to spit this out. If you're a school district and you used to get X money from the state based on the state's property tax collection, and X money from your local supporters through your local property tax collection, and that's the amount of money necessary to run your school, if that didn't fully, I guess the idea is to shrink the amount that the locals give and cap that, and increase the amount that the statewide total gives, because that's basically the state paying for education. That shift is what you guys were trying to work out. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I mean, there are programs and activities that each school district, virtually every school district does, that are not part of basic education. They aren't required by the state.
Right.
They aren't required for graduation.
Talking band, sports, those kind of enrichment sorts of things,
and those things are paid with local levy money. But there's a kind of a mission creep that goes on with activities that aren't part of it, and so we aren't deciding for districts what they're going to do and not do. But if it is basic education, if it falls within that statutory definition, then it's got to be paid for by the state. And that's what the court said, and that's what we're trying to do. And it is not all in this budget that we passed this spring. It's going to be another 2 or 3 years before because the number's just too big. I mean,
Right.
you know, and because I think I know that I felt that, and I argued that you rush into this thing and make the change all in one step, and it's going to be, we have 295 school districts.
Yeah.
And each one is different and unique, and in a lot of ways, and so you end up having not being able to deal with the unintended consequences.
Right. You drop a one-size-fits-all on everybody, and it's going to start squirting out all over the place based on the unique differences of each district and their needs. Right?
So it will be a multi-year transition.
All right,
We made the biggest step first.
If, let's say, for example, Lance Tormey was going to start the Lance Tormey School for Girls, and it was going to be a stripped down. We should say stripped down.
Yeah, don't say.
It was going to be a bare minimum basic education thing. All right? So he would get X amount of money for all the various programs that the state says that we have to have, and he would get X amount of money for salaries for teachers to operate that.
Yeah, and about 80%, I think, is salaries.
Okay.
That the state spends.
All right. So Lance has this money, and then he says, well, I really want to pay my teachers more. Can he run a property levy, property tax school levy up to $1.50 of assessed value to generate money to pay his teachers more? So he doesn't want football. He doesn't want enrichment stuff. He just wants the best qualified, highest paid staff he can get. So we take what the state gives us for teacher salaries, and he takes his levy money. He can apply that to teacher salaries, but there's a cap on how much of that he can do too, right? It's got to be like 10%, but
yeah, I think it's 15%.
50%. But there is an option for that. So if school districts are wondering about that, but I guess the problem for many districts is if they're losing levy money based on whatever the creep has been that's gotten them up to whatever their levy amount is, or how elaborate their enrichment and additional type programs outside of basic education are, that's the stuff that they run the risk of losing, I suppose, isn't it? If
it's a risk, yeah. And the other thing is that people, I think a lot of people and policymakers are I think misled by what goes on, like in Seattle. You know, the median price of any residence in Seattle, the mean price, the median, is $1 million. It's just over $1 million. That's not going to last. And I think the legislature recognizes that. Those values they're being taxed at those values now. And in many cases there are people in King County who are paying more in property tax than they bought the home for.
Wow.
But because they've been there a while.
Sure.
And the increase has been so rapid. But you don't want to make an assumption that's not going to be sustainable, and we have a responsibility, I think, to be prepared to deal with the fluctuation in property tax as it happens at sometime in the future. It could be in a year or two, or it could be a little farther down the road. But value, everything reaches its true value.
Yeah.
And it's inevitable, and we need to be prepared to do that. And I think that this legislation does, I think, position school districts better for that eventuality.
Well, let's wrap her up this way, Mr. Representative. As we look to the next session, the kinds of tweaks or adjustments or stuff that you guys might be dealing with, what do we see that potentially being with McCleary? Or can we say at this point?
I don't know. We're gonna, like I say, we haven't been briefed yet on what the discussions have been, and I think that probably it'll be in October we'll start to get an idea of where the governor is on these things, and we'll have maybe it's always a little bit of a volatility created by the fact that in the House we're all up for election, and so there's the executive branch and the judicial branch, and a lot of voters want to wait and see who wins the election, who gets elected, and not have decisions made by people who aren't going to be serving in January.
You've said in the past you think you're going to be dealing with this
Forever.
McCleary decision forever. Really?
Yeah, I believe so. I believe that first of all, it has always been a challenge to meet the conundrum of trying to have a uniform system of education across the state and allowing local school districts the flexibility to do what they need to do to teach kids.
Huge challenge, yeah.
And we've wrestled with that, I think, ever since that the constitutional provision was adopted. And I do believe that the issue is not the important thing is our children getting a good education, the education that they and their families deserve. And I think that in this state, certainly in the Yakima Valley, may not be true in every single school district, but every district in the Yakima Valley, you can get the best education in a public school that you can get anywhere in the country. I'd say I would anywhere in the world, really. I think you could put our kids up against European students or Asian students any day of the week, and they are learning. That is, you can also get something dramatically less. And what we're trying to do is make it more predictable, make it more uniform, that every student that we possibly can reach will be successful. I think that's what teachers and administrators really want. I don't think they stay in it very long if they don't focus on that. And I don't want the legislature. We may make mistakes and have to do things over again, but I don't want to see us lose our focus and realize and forget that it's about students learning and that we have a successful system. It's not, you look at Topany School District, which I know some of the people there aren't too happy at the moment, but they have done some incredible things.
Boy, haven't they? They really have.
Been able to have their students go to academic and scholastic competition in California and places.
Hanging out with NASA, is that Topany
Yeah,
just doing that? Yeah, Wapato's doing that? Okay.
It's and every school district in the valley has some has situations and has experienced that kind of success. We want to build on that success, and we may not get it right, but we're going to keep trying.
Well, I really appreciate the thrust of this being better educated kids. Along the way, teachers are wondering what's in it for them besides the satisfaction of producing those kids. Here are a couple numbers for you, Bruce, and then we'll let you get out of here. But Othello settled for 17.2% pay hike. Warden, 14.9%. Odessa, 12.9%. Omak, 13%, Bridgeport, 21%, Pateros, is that how I say it?
Yeah,
17.9%, Manson, 15%. These are East Side numbers. Cascade, 15.9%, and Eastmont, 13.1%. And so when you see those numbers in Eastern Washington, and then the Sela school district, people I haven't heard what their offer is, but they're prepared to rally, and Toppenish as well, and Yakima was offered 3.1%. You can see where something doesn't feel right to the people that want to help bring about those outcomes for kids that you said the legislature's intent is all about. And I think they all feel that same way. They just wonder what's going on. So I really appreciate your time. I know you didn't plan on spending this much time with us.
No, I wish I had more to share with you, and I think hopefully I will.
Well, you guys got to get briefed and updated, and we'll have you back. Because like you said, this isn't going anywhere as we continue.
That's what makes every session special.
Yeah. Well, you're a special guy, Mr. Representative. So it's a perfect match. We appreciate our time with Bruce Chandler, 15th District State Representative, and good luck today, sir, the primary. So
thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Appreciate it.